Giant.
Hey, all right, guys, I think we are live. Hello and welcome. Welcome to the first day of summer vacation for kids everywhere in our district.
Yeah, we just got to watch the kids coming out of fifth grade at Lake Ave. Robin and I both have a child in fifth grade at Lake Ave, and it was their last day, and it was nice. It was the Dr. Messier, the principal's leaving. It was a little emotional, but on to bigger and better things.
Yeah.
It was. Are you getting a little static on the audio right now?
I got a little bit, yes.
I'm
Yeah,
good.
me too. Oh, I'm getting a little, well, we'll try to figure that out. But yes, it is a pretty exciting day for most kids. I mean, there's nothing better than like the first day of summer and like running out of school and knowing that you've got the whole summer free. It's like the best feeling in the world. But
If you're the kid and not the parent.
Correct. As the parent, you're like kind of sweating bullets, which is me right now. But Dr. Messier, who's been the principal at Lake Avenue Elementary for years and years, is retiring, and she is a really beloved figure in our community and has touched so many lives. And so it was really emotional for a lot of the parents and the students. But I just wanted to quickly off the top recognize all of her contributions to our community through Lake Avenue School. It's just been incredible.
Yeah. And all the principals and all the Saratoga principals out there.
Yeah, and administrators and teachers and staff, my God, they've made it through a tough 2 years, and our kids are still in one piece. And so we are very appreciative.
That's all.
Yeah. Anyhow, welcome to Talking Saratoga, a weekly podcast about the latest news, discussion, and debate in Saratoga Springs, a city that has never suffered from a shortage of opinions. I'm joined by Adam Israel and Dan DiFederici. Welcome, guys. We have lots to talk about today.
We sure do. It's summer.
I know. Wait, do we ever not have lots to talk about, though?
And it's a city council week, so.
It was a city council week. So I'm just going to launch right into this. So there was some really exciting news that came out of last night's city council meeting. The last award of bid was given for the third fire station on Henning Road, which has been a project that we've been trying to bring to completion or even start for practically 2 decades. So we can serve all of Saratoga Springs and get emergency medical service and fire service to everyone in Saratoga Springs in a proper, short, and fast response time.
Yeah, so to give it a little context, I think the issue was the Eastern Plateau, the neighborhoods around Saratoga Lake.
Correct.
It's just the response time. There's kind of a what's it like 6 minutes or something?
So it was a little bit longer. It was
it's a lot longer. I've waited.
Yes.
Fortunately, the 3 or 4 times, probably at least 4 or 5 times I've called either the fire department or same thing, for rescue squad or fire department. It's maddeningly long. And unfortunately, I had nothing to do but time it. And one time it took 17 minutes. Now, fortunately, there weren't flames shooting from my roof. It was some sort of like something went off in my house, and it was like some strange odor. So we were outside. So it's not like in the first aid calls, it's not like my kid had a bone sticking out of them. Right. It was like a chronic thing that needed an ambulance. So thankfully, I wasn't panicking. But I keep saying to myself, oh my God, if this was one of those horrible situations.
17 minutes is a long time.
Several minutes.
The big concern is that there's recommendations for exactly how long ambulance service or medical service needs to arrive to save someone who's had a life-threatening, like a heart attack or a stroke, to administer life-saving services. You have to be there within a certain window of time, and it's around 5 to 6 minutes, as I recall. And so the average response time to the Eastern Plateau, specifically of Saratoga Springs, exceeds that by several minutes. So by building this third fire station on Henning Road, we're able to cover the entire city within the response time that would allow us to provide life-saving emergency services. And this has been a project that's been trying to get off the ground for, again, almost 2 decades. We made significant progress in the 2 years I was on the council by confirming the property and awarding the bid to the design bid, the contracting bid. And we had just gotten short of putting the project out to bond. But it was bonded, which is something we'll talk about in a minute. But then this final award of bid was awarded last night, I think, for electrical services. Anyway, the point is the groundbreaking is going to be in just about 2 weeks.
Hey, Robin, real quick, let me ask you a question. As far as response times, is that something that the emergency services tracks on a regular basis?
Oh, yes.
Every call they write down.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. So Chief Dolan, who is the chief of our fire department, happens to be also an extremely data-driven person. And that's how he schedules and really operates the fire department. It's all based on analytics and data. And he can show you the maps of coverage and the response times, and they're constantly monitoring it. For example, we have 2 ambulances, but we weren't using 2 ambulances all the time because we didn't have enough staffing. There were some staffing issues. He and I increased the ambulance use and put the second ambulance on significantly more this past summer. Was this past summer? Yes, this past summer. Sorry, I'm getting lost in my calendar years. And then he was able to track the data in terms of coverage, response time, and see how much more efficient we were being, and everything he could break down in numbers and times and geography. And so this third station accomplishes exactly what we needed to accomplish. And that's great because we don't want to have to rely on mutual aid. And we also certainly don't want people to be living in any neighborhood of our city where they're worried about getting emergency medical care for themselves or a loved one, ever. That's one of those things that you just assume is going to be built in and there when you need it. Although, Dan, I got to say, I don't picture you ever panicking because with your history in law enforcement, I'm like, wait, you don't panic. You are the first responder.
I've been known to panic.
You've been known to panic.
So sometimes just before this podcast when we're putting it together. and real quick, Robin, I got to say some accolades to you and your fellow council members from the last council. Yet another example of you guys doing the bulk of the work, the new council. And I'm not putting down the new council. It happens to be, but they get to come in and take the victory lap.
Well, I have to say it was really, the third station was something I campaigned on in 2019. And then the second I took office, the pandemic hit. And I thought, God, there's no way we're going to be able to move forward with this $7 million project. Look, staring down a pandemic budget that was, crippling at the time. But the people we were working with and continue to work with to help with the design and all the, everything that goes on with the building of the station, we got great guidance from them, and we were able to work with the council and public safety and maneuver things such that we could continue to get the design ready and the blueprints ready and the schematics so that we could seek out federal funding or state grants and then be ready to bond the second we knew we had a stronger financial outlook. And so it was a really tricky needle to thread, but we were able to do it and tee up this council to just be ready to go, and that's what they did. So I mean, to imagine that we're going to have a groundbreaking in 2 weeks is just like blowing my mind. Like, it's blowing my mind, you guys. It's so exciting.
Yeah. So it brings up a great point, though. So this is being built now. It's being bonded. How's it being paid for? This is not going to be a cheap investment for the city. Did we get federal funds?
So that is an excellent question. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about next. So I know that there have been grants that have been applied for. I don't know. We haven't gotten the federal infrastructure money yet. I don't know where the federal or state grant or infrastructure money might be. But $6.7 million of this project, which is the bulk of it, was going out to bond when I left. And it did go out to bond. And it will kind of explain what that is for viewers. But it was actually one of 35 projects in our capital budget that was bonded and funded like about 2 weeks ago when we went out to bond. And what that means for people who don't know, because it is kind of confusing, we have like a regular operating budget, and then we have a separate budget for capital projects. And capital projects are like infrastructure, their repairs to buildings, their equipment, but it's all really regulated by state and federal law. And we have bond counsel, like we have a lawyer just to advise us on what projects can be in the capital budget. There's a special committee that meets and prioritizes our capital budget projects. And we had some leftover from 2022 and 2021 that weren't bonded or weren't funded because of the pandemic budget. And Commissioner Songvi was able to include all of them in this year's capital budget and get everything bonded. So a total of 35 projects were funded by selling about $17 million in bonds. And again, for those who don't know, selling bonds means that people are essentially buying, they're investing in Saratoga Springs. They're buying a bond from the municipality of the city of Saratoga Springs. And we have a AA+ bond rating. It's AA+ stable bond rating, which basically means that the market thinks that we're in good financial health and that there's a stable financial outlook for our city, that we've planned well and we're handling the current economy well. And so people should feel confident about investing in our city by buying a municipal bond. And Adam, correct me if I'm wrong with any of that, but I think I've got it right.
Yeah. Essentially, I mean, in the private sector, what a capital project is what the IRS says. Anything that has a life over, I believe, 7 years. So, I mean, that's kind of a simple
It's
simple
6, I
way,
think.
or 6 years. Is it 6 years?
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. If you buy something that's going to take you more than 6, it's going to have a life for more than 6 years. You can't write it off in the first year. Municipalities is the same way, but not the same, but it's different in the sense of how we pay for things because it's one big expenditure that you can't include in one budget because it blow up that year's budget. So you spread it out over some times by issuing these bonds.
I wanted to, yes, go
when
ahead,
done
Dan.
prudently, bonding makes a lot of sense. When governments abuse bonding and bond things that maybe are technically allowed, but maybe not prudent, that's when municipalities and the state of New York, for that matter, can get into trouble.
Well, I just wanted to go over there. I'm not going to go over all 35 things here, but there's some stuff on this list that is really exciting. Obviously, the third fire station, as we said, for $6.7 million was bonded. And then there are some other kind of highlights here. The Lufberry Lake Dam has always been, as far as I know, a cause for concern and needed some serious repair. So there's $1.275 million in there to help with the Lufberry Lake Dam embankment. Also, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but we don't have recycling bins downtown. When I moved here literally 12 years ago and was like drinking a Diet Coke and went to throw it away, I was like, wait, I can't recycle anywhere. Well, thankfully, that is about to change. Commissioner Golub has moved forward with a recycling program. And in here, we have a specific recycling vehicle that has been funded because we needed to make sure we could pick up the garbage and pick up the recycling properly. So that was funded. There are upgrades to traffic signals, City Hall, some City Hall stuff, casino restoration for $510,000. There is stormwater improvements. So like when it pours rain, we don't all get floods. Loaders, a dump truck. Garbage recycling truck.
I saw some lawn equipment on there, which sort of gave me pause. Maybe it technically qualifies, but they were literally buying a lawnmower. It sounds like a pretty expensive one for Congress Park, and it makes me wonder: should those things be bondage, or should those come out of the municipal yearly budget?
They definitely qualify for bonding because they're like big, expensive equipment pieces. And I know that DPW does a really good job of using things until they're on their very last legs. So considering how much they do in terms of maintaining the greenery and flowers and all the beauty of Saratoga Springs, when they say they need a new mower, I say give them a new mower. But security cameras are in here, east side stormwater, sewage pump station upgrades, water infrastructure improvements for $725,000, Saratoga Greenbelt Trail, complete streets design for $100,000. That would be bike paths and whatnot. The ice rink is getting $117,000 rehabilitation. The Veterans Memorial Park Fieldhouse renovations. That is the baseball field, if I'm correct, out by Geyser Crest.
I don't know.
I'm 99% sure it is.
If you know, throw it in the comments.
Yeah, if you do know, throw it in the comments. But they're getting a $375,000 renovation, which if it's the same baseball field I'm thinking of, there were some parents who had started emailing us probably a year ago about the state of like the field and also the kind of like little locker room kind of area. And it was like literally disgusting and like crumbling. And so I think that is also a great project. But just in general, the fact that 35 projects, $17 million going out to bond. This is a great thing. These are going to be little improvements that you're going to notice all over the city, plus our third fire station, which is just fantastic. So just wanted to kick off the show with something a little positive,
Hey, good. Can I ask you a quick question on the comments on here?
Yes.
We stream to several different platforms. My Twitter
We do.
account. Where would someone want to go to see the most comments, or are they everywhere? Are they simulposted?
So,
I don't even know.
Yes. So our StreamYard, which is what we use to stream our podcast on, we can see them live during our podcast all together. But for people who want to look at all the comments, they would have to go to all the individual social media platforms. So we're on Facebook. I know on the Robin Dalton on my page. We're on What's Going On Saratoga. We stream to the Saratoga Report, to your Twitter account. We stream to YouTube. You can also find us on Google Podcasts. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify. we're kind of all over the place. So if people really wanted to track down all the comments, they would have to unfortunately go to all the different places.
But the important part is we see them all. You know, they're all
do see them
condensed
all.
in a nice package for us. So we won't, any comments, we don't miss it.
And Chaz has a question on here. Chaz, it's a long one. I can follow up with you afterwards and give you some thoughts on how you can find your answer.
So he's asking about response times.
Yeah,
Sometimes
I have an answer for him. It just wouldn't be appropriate it would take a lot of time.
My answer is that often our ambulances are out on another call. And so they're not just waiting at the fire station ready to go. And so they may be, especially, this actually happened a lot during the pandemic. They were bringing people to the hospital. The hospital was so full that they were having to wait for hours before they could transport the patient from the ambulance into the hospital. And so if another call came in during that time, we would have to send that call out to mutual aid. So then you're waiting for someone to come from Wilton or Boston Spa or someplace outside the city. And so sometimes that's the reason why someone's experiencing a longer response time. Although it may not be specific to Chaz's situation, but oftentimes that's the reason. Okay. Anyway, speaking of money, the other little fireworks that were happening and a little drama on the city council last night was over a proposed MOA, which is a memorandum of agreement that Commissioner Montanino brought that he had signed and agreed to with the PBA, which is the Police Benevolent Association. And I think it was a bit unexpected for most people. I had kind of heard rumblings about it. And when I read it, I was a little bit shocked. But basically, it was to address the 12-hour shifts that the police are on right now. Because Commissioner Montanino has not been able to maintain minimum staffing levels and so many people have left the department, the 12-hour shifts, which would have worked beautifully if he'd been able to maintain minimum staffing in terms of reducing overtime, giving officers more time off, and putting more bodies on the street for patrol. Because he wasn't able to maintain minimum staffing numbers, now people are working overtime. And I know I think a week or two ago, one of our officers worked 16-hour back-to-back shifts, which is really insane and not safe for him or anyone. I mean, that's just too much.
That's interesting. I know for airline pilots or truckers, there's actually regulations. Is there any sort of regulation, Dan? Maybe you would know this about how many hours in a row. Please,
as far as minimum staffing or minimum or maximum times worked and so forth. No, we search for it. And if there's recommendations and so forth, but nothing hard and fast in the law that I've ever been able to see. And it's been an issue I've dealt with for years. Sometimes even on their way home, I've had troopers fall asleep at the wheel and get killed by a tractor trailer as they drift across the line. But we haven't found a definitive law that prohibits a police agency from mandating X amount of hours. I've worked a 25-hour shift once.
So Dan, there's required, it's mandatory overtime sometimes, right? Like this.
That was that. There's times when overtime, cha-ching, bring it on, and overtime, I'm tired, I want a life, I want to go home. Too bad, kid, you're staying. And I get that. That's part of police work. That's part of fire work. That's part of being a first responder of many sorts. But it can be problematic for both the person as well as the long-term issues for the department, as you've touched on, Robin.
Exactly. It was a little infuriating for me, just this subject in general and what Commissioner Montanino has done and how he's explaining it, though, because, when he first discussed the 12-hour shifts and said he wasn't in favor of them, it was because he cited some sleep study, that proved that, having a 12-hour shift is, going to cause our police officers to be so exhausted. It puts everyone's safety in jeopardy. And I thought that was just kind of it was some arbitrary study from 2012. It seemed like nonsense. It seemed like he was looking for an argument and found a study to support it. And also the PBA and our patrol officers going to 12-hour shifts was something they had wanted across the board universally for years. And it took almost, 18 months to work out how that would look and sign an agreement with the PBA, which was last May. It was just barely a year ago that we went to 12-hour shifts. And again, every step of the way, I would check in with the officers, with the leadership of the PBA, and 100% across the board, they universally wanted to make this change. And so a year later to, be in such a completely different situation and have an MOA that essentially calls for the city to give out incredible financial concessions to the police department to facilitate going to a 10-hour shift. That's what's being proposed now. 2-hour differential in the shift time for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s more in compensation that will compound over time into millions and millions of dollars. And Dan, I know you read the language of this. Perhaps you can speak a little bit more to the specifics of what was offered to incentivize our police department to want to go to 10-hour shifts as opposed to 12.
Yeah, and to kind of repeat what you said in my own words, it seems like Jim Montanino was almost obsessed with ending the 12-hour shifts. He cited safety, but he fails to realize the state police have been on 12-hour shifts for 20 plus years. So many other police agencies are on 12-hour shifts. So he cited one study. But in any event, that's what he wanted, and fine. But the PBA was like, okay, you want those back? We have a right to them. You have to buy those back. And buy he did. Boy, did he bring out the wallet. And that's the problem. Now, listen, I am for those that don't know me well, I'm not only a former state trooper, but I'm the former Troopers PBA union president. So I am for this, for the police officers, not just because they get a lot more money, and they do. It's because I think my heart's in Saratoga. The wealth of the Capital District in many cases is in Saratoga. I think the Saratoga Springs Police Department should be the highest paid in the Capital District. That's part of me, just my own personal thing, but also I think it will benefit the city. That Jim Montanino in last night's meeting did lay out quite nicely why that can benefit the city, why that can save the city money. To train police officers is tremendously expensive because you're paying them for 9 months when they don't give you any service. They're either in the academy or in field training. They're just in training. They can't handle anything on their own, and so you're paying them for all that time, not only their salary but their benefits. Right. And sometimes they wash out of the academy. You pay them for 5 months, and they either flunk out, they do something really stupid at the academy, they do something really stupid on the weekend, and they're fired. And so you pay them for 5 months, and you've got nothing on your return. But if you have a well-paid, well-managed, and that's another thing we'll get to, police department, they can attract lateral transfers from other police departments. So you get experienced, vetted police officers that might have to do some crossover field training for 2 weeks. They got to know the city. They got to know the dispatch system, the computer system, and so forth. But that can be done in probably 2 weeks. It usually is. And then you have a live police officer with experience that's on the streets almost immediately. And yeah, that costs money. That's the trade-off. Sorry, go ahead, Robin.
I just want to explain to people what lateral transfers are, because it was something I didn't know about until 2019 when I was learning everything about the police department. So for those who don't know, prior to about a year ago, if we wanted a police officer, if we wanted to hire a new police officer, we only hire brand new people who we then send to the police academy, who then come out, train with us, and become our police officers. We weren't able to take anyone contractually who had already had a career in law enforcement and bring them in like mid-career. I changed that while I was in office to accept lateral transfers because we were kind of experiencing this strange dynamic where we had a lot of young officers, we had a lot of folks on their way out, but we kind of didn't really have anyone in the middle. And so we were looking for kind of this mid-level folks who might want to come work in our police department. The challenge we ran into immediately, however, was that we have incredibly high hiring standards here. And a lot of the requirements and standards that we have, other departments don't have. So if someone was interested in coming over here, they often would end up being demoted in rank or in pay because they didn't meet the standards that we would require for one of our hires. So that was an issue that was tricky to get around, and we didn't have a ton of applications for laterals. But my kind of fundamental problem here is that Jim is kind of doing this very smart political thing, which is where he's taking like half truth, which is that we've had problems with retention and we have problems with compensation. I've always felt that we needed to raise the base salary of our police officers, but then he's tying it together with like 50% just bullshit. And he's not acknowledging the fact that the biggest impediment for our department right now and attracting new officers and keeping the officers we have is him. It is the punitive steps he has taken over the last 5 months in office, and the culture that he has created is antithetical to people who are law enforcement officers wanting to come here thinking they'll thrive and be successful and be happy. When you create a CRB, when you defund the assistant chief, when you put policies in place like if you're found guilty of adultery, that's a reason to toss you out of the police department. You create policies like that. I mean, everything he's done is fundamentally like anti-police.
Right.
It gives it anti-police sentiment, and that's why people have left in droves. And so, unless Jim's gone, in my opinion, there's not going to be a whole heck of a lot we can do to get people here. But in the meantime, to invest in folks and send them into the academy and invest all this money and time into training, and then have them take that investment and bring it to another municipality, it stinks. It stinks.
Was there any, Robin, was there any requirement for them to stay on our force for X amount of time?
No. And that's actually a really good thing. And I'll tell you why. And Dan, hopefully you'll agree. If somebody thinks they want to be a police officer and they go to the police academy, whether it's at the academy or in the first couple of weeks in our department, they realize, you know what, this really is not for me. This is not what I thought it would be like. I'm not comfortable with it or happy with it. This isn't, the path I want to take professionally. Lord knows we don't want them out active duty serving as a police officer. We acknowledge that, we get it. We know that these are things that you have to try out before you can really commit, especially if you're someone who's like in their early 20s and, trying to figure out what you want to do in life. And the last thing I want to do is have somebody out on the street who is really uncomfortable or unhappy being a police officer. So it's a bummer, but I always, am like, understandable.
The worst of two bad situations. Let me ask you this.
The law requires, if I could just say something real quick, the law requires if a young officer, 2, 3, 4 years, does the transfer to another department, the first municipality that trained that person could demand a pro rata payment from the second municipality to offset some of those costs. That's in the general municipal law. I don't know how often it's utilized, but it's clear as day what that's intended to do.
Dear state police, we're going to send you an invoice of X amount of dollars.
It's only from municipality to municipality.
Oh,
state police, because they train their own people, because they're just not included in that law, they get a free ride on that. That doesn't affect them.
And because, again, for those who don't know, notoriously, the state police list to be, called up to apply or interview for the state police has always been kind of our Achilles heel, because their pay is so much substantially higher than what we're offering our officers. But the concessions they put in this memorandum of agreement, which, again, like Dan, I also, as I've said, want to see our officers compensated more, but I don't think this approach fixes any problem, actually. They included things like longevity pay. They included adjusting what the overtime rate is. They included raising the base salary. And my immediate other concern was that if we do this for one union, will we not have a knock on the door in about 5 minutes from the firefighters and their union saying like, hey, we want some parity here. Like, if you're giving that to those guys, we'd like the same thing.
Yeah, one question I have is, and that's a great point, Robin, actually, is that, it's like with your kids, and not to say that these, the first responders are kids, but that idea of if somebody gets something, everybody else is going to say, hey, what about me? But we last episode we sat and we kind of railed on Commissioner Montagnino. They're not hiring police. They're not doing anything to get more police on. It's going to be a scary summer. Do we think, is there a chance this is going to, at least patch some of that? Well, some people say, wait a second, look, I can come over here. The salary's greater now. I understand the culture environment, but as an employer, different things motivate different people. Right. So there might be some officers say, listen, I can live in a bad environment if I get paid more. Dude, can we give Jim a little credit here for making this a more attractive job?
For this summer in particular, there's not enough time. There's, in my opinion, Dan, maybe
we're in the summer.
There's no time. They discussed it last night. There's a lot of feedback, some critical feedback from Commissioner Songby, from Mayor Kim, not as much from Commissioner Moran, but Commissioner Golub hasn't waited. There's going to be a lot of discussion before they rewrite it, sign a new agreement with the PBA, pass it from the city council, and then put out lateral transfer applications, find someone, hire them, and get them on the street. Best case scenario, I'm saying 3-4 months. If all went perfectly.
And this is going to run into a buzzsaw, right? You sensed it last night, and appropriately so. Even though I'm for this, my problem is nobody in City Hall, certainly including Jim Montagnino, understands what's in that 32-page package. And to our commenter, Chaz, he makes some good points. There probably needs to be a public hearing.
Oh yeah.
And they need to they need to own this. They need to know exactly where every dime and the last time they talked to next year was as far they need to know 5 years out, as Robin, as you and I talked, they need to know 10 years out. And Jim Montanino went into those negotiations, I believe, without Manita, obviously, without anybody from her staff, I think without anybody from HR. How headstrong could you be to do that and not bring in the expertise that Jim, you've been in office 4 months. You're not a budget guy. You're not a financial guy. You're not an HR guy. How do you go in there alone? Maybe he said the attorneys were with him part of the time, but the attorneys have limitations. You need the experts in City Hall to come in there, and then you break and you caucus and you say, well, that's a bad deal because, or that's a good deal because, whatever. I don't think Jim did any of that, and that's a huge problem.
It's a huge violation of the charter too, because the way our city government works, the person who negotiates on behalf of the unions is the mayor with the city attorney and HR. That's who negotiates the union contracts, because this required reopening the PBA contract. Yeah. So the Commissioner of Public Safety does not negotiate with their own department and the union in their own department. It's done via the mayor and the city attorney. But the way the conversation went last night, I don't think Mayor Kim had anything to do with this.
Let me ask you this. Right. The idea of open government is that these ideas are talked about in a public forum. What's the ethics, the legal of having closed door meetings? Sure. to again, we railed on them about having these closed door meetings and kind of coming into these sessions with their minds already made up. Is that something Jim could have done, legally and ethically, or according to the rules of the city? Could he have had closed door meetings and come up with a proposal with the other commissioners?
They can, because negotiations are allowed to be.
No.
Generally speaking,
you can only have. So I'm sorry. You can only have 2 city council people in a meeting together. If you have one more, if you have 3 people, that's a quorum, and that triggers the open meetings law. And so you would have to follow all the rules for open meetings.
But he could have met with Commissioner Singhvi, and he could have met with them individually.
Individually, yes.
Yeah.
And you could have an executive session to talk about, I don't know, some of the contractual details. But yeah.
And it's clear, though, the contract negotiations, the actual negotiations are not subject to the open meeting. They have to be confidential.
Correct.
You can't leak out every back and forth. You just couldn't get anything done.
But there was a really interesting kind of the way the timing went with this. At the beginning of last night's city council meeting, that one of the dispatchers did a presentation at the very beginning of the meeting and walked through all the challenges they're experiencing in dispatch. And basically, they need more pay, more bodies, and a raise in grade in civil service. And made a really, really compelling case by comparing what they're compensated with and how many people they have as compared to different municipalities. Just like an incredibly thorough, compelling presentation as compared to what Jim ended up doing later on in the meeting, that, Commissioner Singhvi and Mayor Kim were like, can't you do it kind of like the dispatchers just did it? Because they laid out their case perfectly. Like, do it more like that, please. Give us comparisons. Give us, it's just a ton more data is needed.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yes, and you're right about the comparisons from the other police agencies. It's online already. I think what's been posted online is inaccurate, but the general gist of it is. But I'm okay with Saratoga Springs being notably higher than other agencies. I want to attract other police officers here. I think my heart is with them, and some of my brain as a taxpayer is with them, because I think it is cost effective in the end. Jim Montanino, I criticize him a lot, but last night he made a very solid argument as to why that could be. His numbers are off, I think, but the generalities that he made of why increasing the salaries could be beneficial for the city, but both in sum and substance, but also financially, made sense.
And you know what, Dan, to that point, I would have nothing but respect for what he just did if he had led with the retention issues, the kind of like basic, like
morale.
Morale, like the basic, trying to make it about the 12-hour shifts. It's just such bullshit that he lost me like right out of the box. And, he's trying to say that like the police officers were working these 16-hour shifts while I was in office and it's been going on forever. Yeah, that's bullshit. That never happened. And the 12-hour shifts were working beautifully through December. So just by starting off with a falsehood, I just, he lost me. But there was some legitimate points that he was making further down the road that you're speaking to, Dan. But the other thing is, somebody does have to look out for the taxpayers here, right? And the percentage increases that he put in this MOA were huge. They were like 185% increases, 210% increases. Like the numbers had no context and they seemed large.
In shift differential, yeah, that is a tiny
Yes.
amount that you can easily percentage. That is legit. But yeah, you're right. There are 6, 7, 8 either increased and or new categories of compensation in there. Again, that I'm for, but nobody in City Hall, only because they've only had this for a day or two now, but Jim for longer, really understands that. And they need to go deep and wide and long and understand that every which way in contract negotiations. When I did it with the state of New York, now they had a full staff that could run these numbers 16 different ways, and they knew what it was going to cost them. And I don't know that the city's done that yet. They haven't had time to, other than Jim, but they need to do that to do their due diligence. Again, I'm for this generally, tentatively, but I want to know what this is going to cost the city, and nobody knows at this point.
You guys, you know what's so scary about this too is that having gone through the pandemic and dealing with that budget crisis, I can tell you public safety has the largest budget of any department in City Hall. It's about a $30 million budget. It's like leaps and bounds over every other department. And that's primarily because almost half of that goes to pensions and retirements. But when the city is in flush times, it's great. We want to, spread that money around, make sure our employees are compensated, do projects that have been, pushed by the wayside. When we're in lean times and really bad times, the first budget that gets cut is the biggest, public safety. And when all of your money is tied up in salaries, the only thing you're going to be able to cut are people. And that's what happened back in 2009, which was a really sad time for the city, in which several police officers and firefighters were let go. It was dramatic. It was terrible. It didn't need to happen, but it did. And it took us 10 years to recover from the 2009 layoffs. We finally got back to those staffing levels in 2019. I think we've now dipped again below them, thanks to Jim, but 10 years to recover from those layoffs. So it can be catastrophically bad.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So where does it go now? Right. So we have this MOA. What next? What's the next steps?
I think Manita has to do some work, right?
Well, so I think
Commissioner Sangvi.
This has to be in the
no, actually,
budget.
Jim does. So Commissioner Sangvi asked a lot of questions, wants a lot of data, as does Mayor Kim. Mayor Kim said, "Listen, I supported addressing this issue with the shifts, but what you've done, the scope of what you've done, is so broad that you need to dial it back in to just addressing the shift issue for me to consider it." Commissioner Sangvi asked for a ton of data, a ton more information. She also asked Jim if I think she said it was $175,000 would be needed to cover the cost of this MOA for the remainder of the calendar year. If that money could come from public safety, if we had that, if public safety had that in their budget, he said yes. I highly doubt they have $175,000 in their budget to cover this for the rest of the year, but beyond 2022, it's going to be new funds coming in. So she needs to see if there's money for that just in general in the city budget moving forward. But I sense that any changes, and I think there will be several changes. I doubt if the longevity will be kept. I doubt if all these different kind of areas that were increased will all remain. And I'm not sure the PBA would be willing to work with Jim on any other document aside from this one, because he tried to make it sound like this is something they wanted because the 12-hour shifts were so miserable for them. But if that was the case, we wouldn't be giving away the kitchen sink, right? Like if it was something the police department wanted, wouldn't the concessions be working in the other direction?
Yeah, good point. Jim's numbers are fiction. There's no way he, without the budgetary expertise, with such a complicated document, could come up with accurate numbers in that short of a period. They're just pure fiction, and my guess is they're going to go up.
Yeah, I think they're informed quite a bit through his deputy, Jason T2. We don't actually talk about a lot on this show, but he is a large part of the problem, in my opinion, of the management of the public safety department. He's a former police officer who had a very fraught relationship with the department. And a lot of the information I think he's giving Commissioner Montenegro is not informed through a sincere belief in wanting to improve the department. I'll leave it at that.
Your opinion, right?
I'll leave it at that. In my opinion. Yes. All in my opinion.
Right.
Anyhow. moving on. I know there was some other stuff we wanted to get to.
Yeah, I know that in the county Democratic Party had a little shakeup. Robin, you want to?
They did have a little shakeup. So this past weekend, the Saratoga City Democratic Committee met because they had to nominate someone for the Commissioner of Public Works. That's going to be a special election this November to fill the seat of Lake Commissioner Sarako. They did a temporary appointment of Commissioner Golub to fill out to complete the rest of the year. But the Republicans nominated Anthony Sarako, who is Commissioner Sarako's son, to run for this position in November. And the Democrats are meeting over the weekend to nominate their candidate to run for the following year. And they did nominate Commissioner Golub, which is, I mean, kind of the obvious choice here, right? He's been doing it for like a month. The City Democratic Committee made it very dramatic. However, they put out tons of press releases and a lot of calls to action, soliciting more applications from people who might want to be interested in doing this. Billy McTighe said that he was going to convince his brother Tommy McTighe to run. There was a lot of drama around who would be nominated, but ultimately it was Commissioner Golub, which I think was the smart choice. But what I heard through the grapevine was that Todd Kerner, who is the chair of the County Democratic Committee, was not allowed to participate in those discussions. He was kicked out of the room, which, for those who know the kind of internal dynamics of city and county committees and the politics, that's really unheard of. Like that's just disrespectful and obnoxious, but just unheard of. That's just not how a committee would operate with the county chair ever. And I think that, again, in my opinion, Todd Kerner and his leadership style represents a much more moderate kind of brand of Democrat. And he's been very successful as the county chair for a very long time. But the city committee has been taken over by voices who, in my opinion, aren't representative moderate Democrats and are really also super challenging to work with. And so he resigned after the meeting on Saturday and was very positive in the email that he sent out. But my guess is that he'd just had it dealing with the very, very high maintenance Saratoga Springs City Democratic Committee and the voices there that are in leadership roles. And I know that Joanne Yepsen, our former mayor, is interested in taking that spot. I don't have a ton of favorable things to say about Mayor Yepsen, so I'm going to kind of bite my tongue on whether or not I think she'd be a good county chair. I think that would suck, actually. Just I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to bite my tongue. I think that would be terrible.
I'm okay with Joanne for what it's worth. Just give some balance there.
I got a decent relationship with her, but hey,
I don't love it when people pretend to be involved in local politics when they're really just using it as an avenue to make money for their consulting business, under the guise of volunteering.
But Robert, what is the next steps for again? Not when we ran and we were independents, I never have been involved with party politics. If there's a Democratic county committee, how many people would be on that? We're talking 5 people, 15.
So there's an executive committee.
Okay.
And then
who picks the next chair, I guess? What's that process?
So it has to go through the executive committee. That's basically the extent of what I know about it.
Yeah.
And the committee is made up of all the different chairs of the different local committees and so forth. But I don't know a ton about the executive board of the county committee. I just know that the Democrats on a county level take a totally different approach from the Republicans on the county level. The Republicans on the county level are led by Carl Zielman. That's their chairman. And he is a very strong leader. He tells the local committees, like, this is how we're doing it. It's going to look like this. You kind of need his blessing to run. He really controls how the Republicans represent themselves on locally in the different committees. For example, in the last election cycle, and previous election cycles, he insists that if you're an endorsed Republican candidate, you also must accept the endorsement from the Conservative Party and be on the conservative line on the ballot. I always had kind of an issue with that because in other places outside of Saratoga Springs, that's probably a positive. But for a Republican who's trying to win in a heavily Democratic city like Saratoga Springs, being on the conservative line is actually a real negative. On the flip side, Todd Kerner and his leadership with the county Dems was to allow for the local committees to operate the way they wanted. He gave them real latitude to run the people they wanted to run, adopt the policies and strategies that they wanted to, adopt per their community. And he would not come in with like a heavy hand and make them do things in a uniform manner. He just kind of managed and was there as a resource. But it was like two totally different styles of leadership. To be honest with you, I think that they both need a little bit of the other, but
right.
Either way, it's an interesting time for the Democrats to have this kind of leadership switch up going into midterms. And in my experience, the Democratic Party is really bad at capitalizing on advantages. They kind of like eat their own.
I won't. They did do this, and I was shocked. They did this. You remember last election cycle, Robin, when we ran, they had this major, huge shift right after petitioning. So Commissioner Moran originally was on for Public Works, and he moved to accounts. Sarah Berger, who was the chair of the local Democratic Party, she was running for Commissioner of Finance versus me. She dropped out. She left that position as the chair, and it just was this implosion, right? Leading into the campaigning season.
Yeah,
I could have swore to have a much bigger, impact on the election, but it didn't really. And I think a little bit of that has to do with, I don't think local news. There's just not local news reporting what's going on in local elections, and it was, for me, that was, they're sensationalized, right? You have the Times Union coming down, giving one end of their report. You have one-sided views on everything. You have blogs, you have people kind of chirping in, but you don't have really somewhere somebody can go for kind of quick, up-to-date, election news. And I think that's a lot why we're doing what we're doing, is to,
Yes.
really kind of home in on what's important and what's going on with the local politics. So
I also think most people don't know, though, about how local committees work and how candidates are nominated and how this kind of minutia works with the hyper local politics. And like my husband, he doesn't give a shit. Like, he doesn't care. Like, I come home like breathless because John Frank's not running again. Dylan Moran's going to accounts. We've got a new person running for Public Works. The chairperson isn't running for finance. And I come home like freaking out. And he's like, what else is new? Who cares? Like, right. When I show up in November, whoever's there is there. Like, he didn't, it wasn't dramatic to him at all.
God bless him.
I know. Thank God there's one of us like that. So I think we all kind of exist in this like real little political bubble, and sometimes forget that for regular people, like, they don't give a shit about petitioning or like, executive committees or chair people switches.
But it's interesting. I think if people have it kind of broken down, I think they would be more involved. So hopefully we provide some of that.
If they want better quality candidates on the ballot in November, this is the stuff they have to get involved in.
Yeah.
Because the committees have a huge amount of power. They pick who you get to vote for. And so, if you want better quality candidates, if you're unhappy with the current leadership, that's where you need to get involved. And get ready, because it can be a little dramatic. It can be a little bit of a roller coaster ride, but that's where these decisions happen. And it is a really tiny group of people who control the options for our city's leadership, and have not done a terrific job, in my opinion, over the last year. That's for sure. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see who ultimately ends up being the new county chair. I think it will be really telling if it's somebody like a Joanne Yepsen, because she really does represent a very specific faction of the Democrats here. Whereas the previous chairs, for example, our local city committee, Charlie Brown was the chair of the committee for, I think, almost 9 years, followed by Courtney DeLeonardis, who chaired the committee, followed by Sarah Berger, who was the chair, all in kind of a short order. To me, all three of those people represent a much more moderate, centrist Democratic voice, and are people who are willing to work with everybody, talk to everybody, and are not kind of caught up in this cycle of kind of like revenge politics, and are not in it for their own financial gain or for any other reason other than they believe in the city and their party.
What I will say is all those positions are unpaid, much like school board, and couldn't pay me enough to do one of those positions.
It is the school board members that's brutal. I completely agree. No one knows who their school board folks are until like something bad and dramatic has happened, in which case they, find out and like scream, but no one ever, they rarely get acknowledged for the good work they do. So I totally agree. Yeah.
We've
Anyway,
covered a
that
lot
being
here.
said, I know we have covered a lot. What time is it? Oh, it's almost 5 o'clock.
Yes.
Anything else we wanted to go over before we hit some cheers and jeers?
We were going to ask our viewers, did you want to do it at the end or you want to do it now?
Oh yeah, should we do it now? And then I know Adam actually has, I think, a Ukraine update for us.
Yeah.
So
Adam,
quick,
maybe you should go.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
you
you
should
go ahead.
start.
Yeah.
So, we're getting ready to head back to Poland and Ukraine. We're going to bring some letters of hope. I did a lot of that in February and or March and April, May. Took some time off to get through the end of the school year with the kids. So we're kind of ramping back up. The war has really shifted since the beginning. Now it's pretty brutal in the east. But one thing we're doing as a fundraiser is next Tuesday. I got to bring up my notes here. Next Tuesday from 4 to 7:30 p.m. at Native Farm Flowers. It's a flower farm in Greenfield Center. It's located at 90 Wing Road in Greenfield. They're hosting a really neat evening where people can come, bring a picnic, bring a bottle of wine. We're going to make some Ukrainian themed bouquets of flowers. There's going to be some live music. The suggested donation is $20 per bouquet, and all that money is going to come over with me to Ukraine to help bring comfort to the refugees who are under attack right now by Russia. So,
Adam, I think it's big bouquets of sunflowers too, isn't it? Like really cheery.
It is. They don't tell me the specifics because it's kind of I'm not a
Flowers are lost on you.
but it's really neat what they're doing. Again, it's Native Farm Flowers next Tuesday from 4:30 to 7:30. From 4 to 7:30. Come anytime. Bring a picnic. Bring the kids. It's going to be a fun event. So just want to get
so bummed I'm not going to be here, Adam. For some godforsaken reason,
Well,
I decided to take my kids camping.
This is the 28th, right? The next week. Okay.
The 28th with the rain date, the 29th. June 28th is the party.
Awesome.
If not, it's the rain date 29th. You can look at our Facebook page, Letters of Hope for Ukraine, for more information.
Thank you for that, Adam.
And you're going back in July, or what? When do you?
Yeah, early July. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So we're headed back soon. We're just we're out shopping now, getting some things here you can't get over in Central Europe, and we made a lot of cool contacts over there. People who can help us help Ukrainians. So we're going to do some neat things.
Well, thank you for helping keep it in the forefront of people's mind, because I think there was so much going on in our country, in our city. We forget that the world exists sometimes outside of what we're seeing. And
national politics. But I think we don't touch into that. We could be here for 4 hours.
I know. Yeah. You want to hear some cursing. Yeah. Anyway, all right, let's do some cheers and jeers, you guys. What do you got? Who's got a cheer and jeer for me?
I'll jump in with a cheer. Very recently, I've had an elderly family member at Saratoga Hospital. And to be honest with you, it took a really long time in the waiting room. It took the point is they're understaffed. This is a cheer, though, for all the staff. They were stressed. They looked tired. We talk about the police department and the stress and being tired and exhausted. I sensed it up at the hospital. They are severely understaffed. It's a sign of the times with the economy, although I think they got to do better, because we should not have to have an elderly person waiting in the waiting room for 5.5 hours. And that's what we did. And that was a problem. So, but it's a positive thing. I want to cheer the staff at the Saratoga Hospital for doing as solid of a job as could be expected under trying circumstances, and being what appeared to me to be exhausted and overworked because of the lack of staff.
You want to cheer management?
That for a minute, though? Wait, can I? No. I don't.
No, I won't. But they do need to do better. They need to find a way. I know
Dan,
it's a tough economy to hire people.
No, but Dan, that's not
the.
It is an unprecedented period where medical professionals, whether they were nurses, doctors, admin, whatever, having spent 2 years having to deal with people who denied the science behind what their hospital was experiencing, that was a huge reason for people wanting to leave and go into other professions, because they just couldn't deal with it anymore. And I know that was, I know a lot of people who left the medical field because they were just like, I can't handle seeing another patient in whatever capacity that was, who is coming in and we're admitting them and they're sick and dying from COVID and denying the existence of COVID the whole time. I mean, they just think the morale and like what that did to people mentally, it was just, they needed to take a break. And so I think we've seen a lot of people leave the medical field. And it's not like you can just hire nurses and doctors like right and left and staff. I mean, those are like trained professionals that are in high demand. They're hard to find outside of like major metropolitan areas anyway. And so I think Saratoga Hospital is doing the absolute best they can. I'd rather have someone of quality than just have more bodies. Although I know the waiting obviously can be brutal, but they're certainly feeling it too. So I only have admiration for the hospital and what they do. But yeah, I blame all of that on the COVID deniers and the people who deny science. They're who we should be pissed off at.
I blame the Chinese.
I'm
Oh, Jesus,
done. I don't have a jeer.
You don't have a jeer? I have a jeer. It's not local. Can I jump in with it?
Go for it.
Okay, my jeer, you guys. I don't know how I was kind of late to the party in this one. My husband watches so much golf, right? He watches Golf Channel all the time. It's like there's a golf tournament happening like 24/7 somewhere around the world. I just kind of dug into the Saudis and Saudi Arabia creating this golf league called LIV, L-I-V, and offering, some of the highest profile PGA players obscene amounts of money to leave and come play for their new league, to basically sports wash the reputation of their country, to be like, yeah, we're not human rights abusers. We're not people who like behead people for being gay. We didn't sponsor those terrorists who flew into those buildings back in 9/11. We didn't kill that guy Khashoggi from the Washington Post. We're good guys. Look, we've got these nice golf leagues. While Phil Mickelson, who is like a super famous golfer here in America, accepted $200 million to leave and go play for the Saudis. And I was just like, shame on you. It was so disappointing to me. It was so shocking to me. And he had a press conference this week, and the guy is a hot mess. He's clearly not sitting well with him, this decision he's made to sell his soul for a couple $100 more million on top of the couple hundred he already has. So anyway, my cheer is just to like the golfers who are defecting and going over to play for the Saudis. You guys suck. I hope you never come back here. I hope if you play in PGA tournaments, everyone heckles the shit out of you because you deserve it. And so that's my big cheer.
Well, they can't. So the big thing there is they're not allowed to play in PGA tournaments. So the PGAs have this long-standing rule that they can
play in some majors, I guess. So
So
yes,
if they played in a major and won it and had an exemption, they can play in it. But yeah, Brooks Koepka, the 19th best player. Phil Mickelson, great golfer, a little past his prime. He's like when the famous soccer players would come to America after their prime, from Europe to play.
Oh yeah,
but
David
Brooks
Beckham.
Koepka, they're getting some good guys now. It's not great for the sport, Robin. I agree with you, and it's bad for Americans to be jumping on this regime.
I'm hoping it gives an opportunity for some of the younger golfers to like shine and like I don't know.
We should note the Saudis are involved in horse racing as well. It's a different animal what's going on, but there is some crossover between jockeys that come here to Saratoga and what goes over there. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but I think we should flag it.
Yeah. There's been and I know there's been some controversy here about the Saudis that have come here and have horses here. And anyway,
exactly.
That's a whole other story. It's a whole other jeer. I can't remember I think my cheer for the week was just to Dr. Messier, honestly, because all my kids have gone. 3 out of 4 of my kids are at Lake Avenue. I have a 4th going into kindergarten, and Dr. Messier as a principal sold me on the public school system. I was a spoiled private school girl from New York City and very reluctant to have my kids in public school anywhere. And what she did at Lake Avenue Elementary just changed, our lives and enhanced our lives in so many ways. So that was my cheer for the week.
All right, I'll start with my jeer. My jeer actually is for myself. Last podcast we talked about the risk and safety. What the Maryland moving into
Maryland, the mayor's department.
Yeah, moving the mayor's department. Mayor Kim had kind of brought it up and tried to push it through. Commissioner Montanino wasn't there. He wasn't going to have the vote, so it died. I thought for sure, we took a poll. I thought they were going to push it through this last meeting. It never came up, so that seems like a dead issue now. Comes up again, we'll let you know. So that's my jeer. My cheer, if you can't tell, I went camping with my son and the Lake Ave 5th graders. Came back with a cold. The whole family got a cold. Not COVID. We all tested, but I don't know. Have you guys ever seen these things? And this is not a teapot. I just put my tea bag in here because I sound hoarse and I'm drinking tea. But have you ever seen one of these things, a neti pot?
Oh, yeah, the neti pot? Yeah.
Oh, these are the best. Dan, have you ever seen one of these?
Yeah, but I don't
You're
know
like-
much significance about them.
Yeah, so
You're like,
you put like a saline solution in there and you dump it in your nostril and completely flushes out. My wife won't do it, but boy, it just
doesn't it
really
like come out the other nostril?
comes out the other. Yeah, but it just
Yeah, I can't do that.
completely flushes your sinuses. It's if your sinuses are stuffed, it's the most refreshing, gross, but once it's done, refreshing thing you can do. So cheers to the maker of the neti pot.
Wow.
Can I just giggle for a second? Because Dan, I got to tell you, Adam and I have seen each other at like a bunch of Lake Avenue events over the last like week or two. Every time I see him, I like forget that we also have kids in our I'm like, oh hey, Adam's here.
Graduating fifth graders.
I know. I'm like, we spent so much time together. We talk about so many things, and then I see him at Lake Avenue. I'm like, oh yeah, you're a parent too. I'm a parent, and I'm always like surprised every time. Anyway, well, I think that's it for today.
Wait. Do we want to talk about a name change?
Oh, yes, that's right. Okay, final topic. So it was brought to our attention that there's another radio show here in Saratoga on Saturday mornings called Talk Saratoga. And, a buddy of mine, Rick Thompson, hosts the show. And he, I think was a bit unhappy with the name of our podcast, Talking Saratoga. And I want to apologize to him because there was never a moment in which I think any of us thought about Talking Saratoga, the name, outside of the context of anything but this. And that was short-sighted of us, but I never would want to negatively impact someone else's brand or brand name that they've established. And so he brought it up, and we, of course, immediately said, we're sorry, no problem, and are coming up with a new name for our podcast. And so we want to get the viewer suggestions. If anyone has a suggestion for a new name, email us. I'll put up the email right now, but you can send your email to info@talkingsaratoga.com. We're going to move kind of quickly with this name change and hopefully have some ideas by next week because we want to respect our friend Rick Thompson and his show and clear this up. And I don't know, Dan, Adam, I don't know if you guys have any ideas already off the top of your heads, but I'm sure we'll come up with something brilliant.
Yeah, well, and the viewers, we're hoping they take us off the hook and just give us something brilliant on their own. That way we don't have to think. We just get the value of it.
Did you guys see in England they did this? And please don't do this, but if you do, but they want to name a boat, and so people can put out a boat name. Whatever got the most votes win. And somebody put out Bodie McBoatface, and that won. Google Bodie McBoatface and the story behind it. They didn't actually name the boat Bodie McBoatface, but
it's like, do you see Turkey? The country is also rebranding. They're like, don't want to be called Turkey anymore. So they've like come up. It's whatever. It's really, yeah. So don't send us like, how about STSU
you can send us funny
Saratoga?
ones too.
No, you can.
We're thick-skinned. If you got something funny, not mean-spirited, but funny, we'll
we can tolerate some mean. Send us whatever you got.
Folks, whatever you got. On the campaign trail, we can deal with mean.
Exactly.
Hey, quick aside, I'm going to interject here. We are trying to come up with a special podcast before Tuesday's primary election. Please vote if you're in a party. We may have a special one. We may have gubernatorial candidates. We're talking to some of them right now. We're not sure if it's going to happen, but it could be as early as Friday, possibly Monday, that we would post it. But just a heads up, we're not promising that, but we are talking to a number of candidates.
We're always hustling over here.
We are always hustling, and we're hustling for you, Saratoga.
Yes. Keep informed.
Hustle Saratoga. That's our new name.
Hustle Saratoga. Living the life.
The Saratoga hustle.
3-4 hour city council meetings, so you don't have to.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right,
guys.
Stay sharp, Saratoga.
Thanks for watching.